This seminar is for educational purposes only. It is not a substitute for professional medical advice or treatment. Consult with your medical provider for medical advice or treatment. Although the presenters try to keep the information in this seminar as accurate and timely as possible, the speakers and Mather Hospital assume no duty to ensure the seminar is error-free. The speakers and Mather Hospital are not responsible or liable for any claim, loss, or damage resulting from you viewing this seminar.
Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us today for our HealthyU webinar series. Today's webinar is Achieving Fitness Goals with Nutrition and is sponsored by New York Cancer and Blood Specialists. At any time during the presentation, please feel free to enter any questions you may have using the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen. We'll answer as many questions as we can, and your questions will remain anonymous as always. Today's presenter is Danielle Johnson. Danielle Johnson is a registered dietitian and a registered yoga teacher. She attended LIU Post for her bachelor's degree and advanced training in dietetics and is currently earning her master's in integrative nutrition at Stony Brook University. She's been working at the Bariatric Center of Excellence at Mather Hospital since September 2018. And Danielle is passionate about building healthy relationships with food, body image, and exercise through mindfulness. Danielle, you can go ahead and get us started. How are you?
I'm good. How is everyone else today? And I do also just want to add, since last year, I did also become a personal trainer. So that is something else that I work into my overall practice. So let's get started. So when it comes to fitness goals, prioritizing nutrition is an important component that sometimes can be overlooked. It's highly recommended to work with a professional. They will help set goals specific to you. They will provide specific nutrient recommendations, as well as provide evidence-based education and guidance to achieve those goals. And if you look at the picture I have here on the bottom, when I say work with a professional, what I really mean is working with a dietitian. Dietitian is a credentialed term, and to become a dietitian, you have to do a 4-year bachelor's, which it's actually now that you have to do your master's, but dietitians who are already dietitians, they are grandfathered in, but any new coming dietitians have to earn their master's before they sit to do a dietetic internship, which is a professional supervision, and it's a 1-year internship that we have to do prior to taking our exam to get our credentials, where the word nutritionist isn't a very regulated term, and a lot of people can just call themselves a nutritionist, but not everyone can call themselves a dietitian. So dietitians are highly trained in nutrition, food, and they're the best ones to help you achieve these goals. We prioritize food first, so focusing on energy balancing, making sure that you're getting enough calories, nutrient availability so that you're getting enough nutrients within your diet and having a variety, and then also focusing on high quality nutrients. The way we fuel our body is based on expected activity, so it can vary from day to day, which this is where a dietitian can be helpful to kind of look at what your activity is like from day to day to kind of help balance it out. And consider supplementation last. You do want to make sure that you speak with medical professionals as well as nutrition professionals to make sure that if there's a certain supplement that you want to take, if you're on certain medications, or if you have certain diagnoses, you might want to clear that with a professional prior to starting it. Next slide. Start off by setting your fitness goals. So we want to make sure that we have a really good goal to start with, and we do that by setting SMART goals. So anyone who's never heard of SMART goals, it's an acronym that stands for specific, measurable, actionable, realistic, and time-bound. So you want to be clear and specific so your goals are easier to achieve. This also helps you know how and where to get started. Measurable goals can be tracked, allowing you to see your progress. They also tell you when a goal is complete. Actionable. Are you able to take action to achieve the goal? Actionable goals ensure the steps to get there are within your reach. And then realistic, avoid overwhelm and unnecessary stress and frustration by making the goal realistic. So don't shoot for the moon, but you want to make sure that you're able to achieve the goal that you're setting. And time bound. By setting a date, it helps you stay focused and motivated, and it can help inspire you and provide you something to work towards. Some examples, starting with the outcome goal. So there's a couple of different goals to set. The outcome goal is the singular goal that you're working towards. This is the one that we all kind of commonly know. So some examples: I'll lose 15 pounds by May 1st. I will squat 175 pounds by July 20th. I will run 2 miles straight by April 30th. And again, realistic. So you have to take into account what your situation is. Maybe there's someone here who's had an injury, and maybe it's hard for you to even just stand up out of a chair on your own. That could be a goal to set as well that's related to fitness. I will stand up on my own once a day by April 1st. So it really depends on where the person is and where they're trying to get. So after the outcome goal, you want to set your process goal, which are the smaller goals that you will set to achieve your bigger goal. Some examples: I will commit to full body strength training 4 times a week. I will reduce my caloric intake by 250 calories per day. I will work with a personal trainer 3 times a week, focusing on lower body strength. I will run a quarter mile for 1 week and increase by a quarter mile each week until I'm able to run 2 miles straight. So again, these can vary. And also keep in mind that there are 5 different components of physical fitness, and ideally you do want to incorporate all of these within your fitness goals. I know some people do like to really focus strictly on cardio or focus strictly on strength training, but it is good to have a nice mix because the body works in a variety of different ways. It doesn't just work with strength or just work with cardio. It's good to have a little bit of everything in there. So we've got cardiovascular endurance, your body's ability to deliver oxygen to working muscles during exercise. This helps decrease resting heart rate, blood pressure. It helps increase the stroke volume and cardiac output, which means there's more blood going out to the body, which is a good thing. Improved oxygen uptake, improved blood lipid profiles like cholesterol and triglycerides, improved blood flow back to the heart. And this is a lot of the things that we know, like walking, jogging, running, biking, swimming, anything that helps get the heart moving faster. Then we have muscular endurance, which is your muscles' ability to exert force repeatedly for an extended period of time. So it doesn't really matter what kind of exercise it is, it's just being able to do it for a longer period of time. Muscular strength, your muscles' ability to exert a maximum amount of force in one effort. So this is anything that helps increase our strength. It could be weightlifting, it could be using resistant bands, body weight exercises, even running. Even running and cycling can count towards this as well. Flexibility, your muscles and joints' ability to move through their full range of motion. So this can help decrease muscle soreness, prevent or at least reduce injury risk. And this can be things like foam rolling, yoga, static stretching, Pilates, massage therapy even can help improve flexibility. And then body composition is your body's ratio of lean muscle to stored fat, which I'll go over a little bit later in the slides. A review on metabolism. From my experience working with patients, a lot of people are very confused on what metabolism is. And it refers to all the chemical reactions that occur in the body to maintain itself. Energy metabolism is how energy is transformed through various biochemical reactions. Just a little refresher on the first law of thermodynamics. Energy can neither be created nor destroyed, only recycled or converted from one form to another, which is the concept of energy balance, which is the picture I have here on the bottom. Before I get to that, just want to also point out, energy is required to sustain life, support exercise, and promote recovery from any activity. And when I say energy, I am referring to calories because calories are energy. 70% of the calories that we consume every single day are used for what's known as the basal metabolic rate. And this is the daily minimum level of energy or calories that our body needs just to function effectively. So when we're not getting that bare minimum, there's going to be something going on in the body that's not working as efficiently as it should. And then looking at the picture on the left, it just kind of shows that first law of thermodynamics. Energy, chemical energy goes into the body through the form of carbohydrates, fats, protein, and other nutrients. It is broken down into what's called ATP, or it's transformed into ATP, which goes into our metabolism. It gets used for energy, and whatever isn't used comes out as chemical waste, carbon dioxide, water, heat, which is also known as fat burning. And if it can't come out that way, then it will be stored as energy within the body. Exercise metabolism relates to the unique physiological changes and demands placed on the body during exercise. So that is something that has to be considered with our overall daily caloric intake. Most people do assume that metabolism's easy to manipulate or that theirs is broken, that they need to starve their body or eat low carb, high protein to boost the metabolism. But I really want to emphasize that there are a lot of different factors that affect metabolism besides the way we eat and the way we exercise. It can also be affected by some things that are out of our control and some things that are within our control. But for things like age, gender, body composition, medications, pregnancy, disease states, genetics, and the environment. And the picture on the bottom here just kind of shows the energy balance. So when we have a balanced weight, we're consuming and expending the same amount of energy. With weight gain, we're consuming more energy than we're expending, and weight loss, we're consuming less energy than we're expending. Next slide. Carbohydrates. They are the main source of energy for the body. They are involved with energy production and healthy metabolism. It's the most important aspect of sustaining moderate to high intensity exercise, as well as sustaining duration of exercise. Our brains and our muscles use it the most. And I know there's definitely like lots of confusion about carbohydrates. Most people think that they shouldn't be eating them or that they should be significantly reducing them. But when it comes to exercise, carbohydrate is one of the most important factors, and a lack of carbohydrate can lead to quicker fatigue. And this is where dietitians can be really helpful to make sure that you are getting adequate amounts of carbohydrate. Chronic excess of carbohydrate is what will lead to storage of fat, but if it's just once in a while you might be overeating carbohydrate, it's not going to promote fat deposition. It's when you chronically overeat carbohydrate, as well as other things involved, but this is why it's good to work with a dietitian to kind of get all of that into play. Carbohydrates also maintain electrolyte balance, stimulate post-exercise recovery, and it improves muscle protein synthesis and utilization of fat. So it also helps the other nutrients in the body. Next slide. So the amount of carbohydrate intake can depend on the type of exercise you're doing and how long you're doing it for. And again, this is where it's important to work with a dietitian because there's a lot of numbers here. There's a lot of different factors. It also is helpful to know if someone is trying to lose, maintain, or gain weight, because that can also change the way these numbers are used. And I have in here grams per kilogram per day. And just so you know what kilograms are, you take your body weight in pounds and divide it by 2.2 to get the kilograms. So with light and low intensity exercise, it's 3 to 5 grams per kilogram per day. And this is where a lot of people do fall into, unless they are athletes or training for marathons, then it might be higher, but most people do fall into that light and low intensity. Moderate, which might be an hour a day, 5 to 7 grams per kilogram per day. High intensity or endurance, maybe practicing 1 to 3 hours a day, would be 6 to 10 grams per kilogram per day. And then very high, which is going to be like elite athletes, 4 to 5 hours a day would be 8 to 12 grams per kilogram per day. Some other carbohydrate tips. Ideally, you do want to keep the glycogen stores in your muscles filled. So they should be a part of your pre-exercise fuel as well as your post-exercise fuel. Some examples for let's say it's an hour or less before exercise, aiming for about 15 to 30 grams of carbohydrate. So it might be a serving of fresh fruit, half an English muffin, or an 8-ounce sport drink like Gatorade. Then looking at 2 to 4 hours before exercise, aim for about 30 to 60 grams of carbohydrate, which would be more of a balanced meal. So it kind of depends on the last time you ate, what your overall schedule is like, and again, what your goals are. If you're training for an event or competition, you might want to test carbohydrate fueling during training and avoid anything new at the event in case it were to cause any sort of gastric distress if it doesn't agree with you. You don't want that to happen when you're at the event that you're training for. You want to do it during practice. And if your exercise length is 1 to 2 hours or longer, it's ideal to ingest carbohydrate during exercise, about 30 to 60 grams, like a sports drink. If exercise is over 2 hours, it's better to ingest 60 to 90 grams during exercise. protein. So I know protein is something we kind of all know about. Protein is very popular in society, and it is an important part of achieving exercise goals. We all know that it does build muscle. Besides that, it also builds bone tissue, connective tissue like tendons and ligaments, and organ tissue. So it really is part of all the tissue in the body. It provides energy, amino acids that are involved in metabolism. It creates hormones, and they're also part of the building blocks for the immune system, so they help keep us healthy. It's also part of fluid balance, so when plasma protein levels are low, meaning that you're not getting enough protein, then it's going to affect the fluid balance, and we see the fluid that's supposed to be within the bloodstream leaking out into the it's called the interstitial space, which can leave people looking swollen. So a lot of the time it is seen in like the lower legs and ankles. So some recommendations for protein intake, general population recommendation, and this is just general for maybe you're not moving around too much, just sedentary, just what we should be getting in minimally is 0.8 grams per kilogram per day. Looking at endurance training, it could be somewhere between 1.2 to 1.6 grams per kilogram per day. And then if someone's doing strength and power, it would be more towards 1.6 to 2.0 grams per kilogram per day. And if someone is healing from an injury, it would also fall into that 1.6 to 2.0 grams per kilogram per day. Ideally, you want to aim for 20 to 40 grams of protein per eating event. And this is because the body can only absorb so much protein at one time. And it is shown in research that about maximally, the body can absorb about 40 grams of protein at one time. So if you serve yourself, let's say it's 70 grams of protein in one meal, you're not going to absorb all of that protein. You're only going to be able to absorb so much of it. So which is helpful to divide the protein intake evenly throughout the day. You want to make sure you have it at every eating event because it's going to help you meet your daily needs. It'll optimize the absorption of protein, and it'll also increase the thermic effect of food throughout the day, which is just a fancy way of saying digestion. So we do burn calories while digesting, and protein has the highest thermic effect of food. So that's why it's important to include it at each eating event. If you only have protein at, say, 3 out of 6 eating events, you are not getting as much thermic effect of food as you could if you were to have it at all 6 eating events. Hope that makes sense. Next slide. And fat. So I know sometimes there's some weird feelings around fat, but it is an important nutrient and it's also an essential nutrient. And again, we want to focus on balance. Some of the good things about fat is that it provides structure in the human body. It provides a large amount of stored energy. It provides most of our energy at rest, sleep, and low intensity exercise like walking. The optimal fat burning zone is considered 65% of VO2 max. And just to kind of give you an idea of what that is, it's 65% of your maximal effort, where maybe 100% would be sprinting, 25% is basic walking. So 65% would be more like jogging. When our energy stores start to deplete carbohydrate, fat will take over. It's also involved with hormone production, immune function, and it's important for absorbing and storing vitamins. And I do want to point out that even the leanest of individuals can have a lot of stored fat energy. So let's say, for example, an athlete who weighs 86 pounds, which isn't very much, has a body fat of 10%. That's 17 pounds of fat. And within the body, that means that there's 70,000 calories of stored fat within their body. So even someone very small can have a large amount of fat stored in their body, but it doesn't really appear that way. And that's, again, what's going to be important for the structure in the human body, providing stored energy, our energy at rest and when we're sleeping, and just a variety of other functions within the body. The recommendations for fat are 20 to 35% of your total calories, so basically makes up the remainder of your calorie intake after calculating how much protein and carb you need. And most often it works out to be 0.5 to 1.0 grams per kilogram per day. Micronutrients, which are our vitamins and minerals, are also very important. A well-balanced diet will provide all the nutrients needed, except for maybe vitamin D, because there's not too many foods that are sources of vitamin D. It's known as the sunshine vitamin because it comes from the sun, works with our skin to turn into vitamin D. Micronutrients play important roles for a variety of functions. So they're involved with metabolism of all nutrients, energy production, brain function, antioxidant activity, DNA synthesis, blood formation and coagulation, eye health, wound healing, skin health, bone health, cartilage formation, electrolyte homeostasis. There's a whole bunch of other things. So the vitamins and minerals are an extremely important component to make sure that the body is working the way that it should, it's healing properly, and building muscle if that's what your goal is. Some nutrients of concern related to exercise: vitamin D, calcium, and iron. Iron, especially for menstruating females, as well as people who either run, sprint, or do a lot of jumping exercises, because when our feet are pounding on the pavement, it's called lysis of the red blood cells, which means the red blood cells basically die. So they do need to be repleted, and usually requires more iron in those types of activities. B6 might be a nutrient of concern if the diet is calorie restricted, and exercise might also increase the excretion through the urine. And B1 might be another nutrient of concern if following a low carb diet, and there is a high amount stored in muscle. So just some things to keep in mind. Hydration is another important component. There is a wide variety of functions that water does play in our overall health. Fluid balance, it helps prevent fatigue, helps normalize our blood, it affects our brain, it helps lubricate the joints, helps remove any toxins from the body, it can provide clearer skin, and it also just provides fuel for our muscles. And regardless of what type of activity you are doing or how long it's for, you should start exercise adequately hydrated. Dehydration causes fatigue and decrease in performance. And like I said, it helps grease the joints and fuel the muscles. So you don't want to go into a workout without adequate fluid. Some hydration tips: drink to thirst isn't always sufficient, because thirst tends to be triggered when the fluid levels are already low within the body, but you should still drink when you're thirsty. You should also check the color of your urine. The lighter or clearer it is, the more hydrated you are. And if you are someone who sweats a lot, or if you are in prolonged exercise, you might want to consider fluid with electrolytes, so something like Gatorade. The general population recommendation is 64 ounces of water per day, or half your body weight in water. General fitness recommendations for men: 130 ounces per day, women 95 ounces per day. And that's just because you're moving more, you're sweating more, so you'll need more water. Body composition. So our body composition is made up of a variety of things. The two big components are going to be muscle and fat. With muscle, there are different types of muscle tissue. We have skeletal, cardiac, and digestive, and they all store water. So that's why sometimes people will see, especially with low carb diets, because carbohydrates mostly are stored in the muscles, you're going to see a quick decrease in the weight, because the carbohydrate, which for each gram of carbohydrate that is stored, there's 3 molecules of water stored with it. So we do tend to see that's where weight loss comes off first from a low carb diet, because you're depleting the stores in your muscles. So anyway, muscle acts as an engine in consuming energy. So as muscle mass increases, the rate at which you burn calories increases, leading to an increased metabolism, which helps reduce body fat. So I know, especially for women, they tend to be afraid to increase their muscle in fear of looking too bulky. First of all, it takes a very long time to build muscle, so it would take a long time for a woman to look bulky. But ideally, if your goal is to reduce body fat, you are going to want to increase your muscle mass. An increase in muscle mass can cause an increase in weight gain because the tissue is very dense. It does not mean that there's more fat on your body. And you can see in the picture here, that's 5 pounds of fat, the yellow, compared to the 5 pounds of fat, the like reddish pink color. So the muscle weighs more because of the density of it, where the fat is more fluffy, but the fat takes up more space. So that's why muscle is considered lean, because you might weigh more, but your body's going to look a lot different compared to fat. But fat is also important. It's essential for maintaining body temperature, cushioning our joints, and protecting internal organs. Our excess calories are stored in our fat cells. If the stored fat is not converted into energy later on, it creates excess body fat. But we want to focus on a balance, because too little body fat increases the risk of injury, osteoporosis, and irregular menstruation. So women do need to have a certain amount of body fat in order to menstruate properly. And it is sometimes known that when there's drastic weight loss, or if someone loses a lot of weight, they might experience like bone breaks or fractures, or an increased risk of osteoporosis. Too much body fat increases the risk for hypertension, heart disease, type 2 diabetes, and certain cancers. And the way that the body fat is distributed is also really important. And typically when there's excessive abdominal fat, that's when it's known to be dangerous and increases those risks of disease, compared to when the body fat is more distributed evenly. Next slide. This is just a little chart to kind of just show what the healthy body fat ranges are. It does change based on your age, and it's also different for men compared to women. So I can't really go over the whole thing because there's a lot of information on here, but the green is where it's ideal for women. So it kind of falls typically between 25 and 35%, depending on the age, might be a little bit less, a little bit more, but ideally for women between 25 and 35%, where men are significantly lower. It's more between like 10 and 25% is considered healthy for men. So it can vary. And again, the drastic difference between men and women really comes down to hormones. Some tips for improving body composition. In order to preserve lean body mass, aim for 0.5 to 1% of weight loss per week. If you are losing faster than that, you are most likely risking the loss of muscle mass, which again, like I was talking about a couple slides ago, we want more muscle on the body because that's what's going to really help improve the body composition. Aim for small, frequent meals throughout the day. This comes back to the thermic effect of food that I mentioned earlier. So having the small, frequent meals throughout the day, let's say 6 eating events versus 3 eating events, is going to be more beneficial because you're allowing your body more opportunity to burn calories through digestion. And another thing, when we, let's say, using that example of 6 eating events versus 3, it allows you to break up your calories throughout the day, because when we have 3 large meals, if we're having more calories than our body needs, it's going to end up storing the excess as fat, where you might not have that issue if you're having smaller meals spread throughout the day. If you're going to have a caloric deficit, you want to have a small caloric deficit, somewhere between 200 and 500 calories per day. Higher protein intake to increase muscle mass during calorie restriction is definitely important to help preserve the muscle. So it might need to be bumped up to 2 to 2.4 grams per kilogram per day. Definitely important to avoid fad diets like keto, intermittent fasting, some other crazy diets that might be out there. These two especially, I mean, they go against exactly what I was just saying in terms of like small frequent meals throughout the day or the importance of carbohydrate. These fad diets, they might produce weight loss, but they are usually not sustainable long term. And if you can't continue to do what you did to lose the weight, then you're going to see weight regain. A lot of these fad diets do impact performance. They increase the loss of muscle mass. They increase weight cycling, which causes higher weight gain and increases risk of chronic disease. And it can also negatively impact our mental health. These fad diets, they promote unhealthy relationships with food and exercise, and they get us caught into these traps where we're just jumping from diet to diet to diet, hoping that the next one's going to be the one that fixes us. And then some exercise tips that can be helpful for improving body composition. Standing versions of exercise burn more calories by increasing activation of core muscles. So let's say, for example, chest press, doing a standing chest press on the pulleys. So where you're standing and pushing forward instead of lying down on a bench. It's important to train all parts of the body, not just your abs. You want to incorporate other core exercises besides crunches or sit-ups. And again, you really want to train all parts of the body because you don't just use your core, you use all parts of your body every day. Interval training or circuit training can also be helpful. Circuit training, there's minimal rest in between sets, so you're kind of just going continuously. Interval training, you might be going really fast and going really slow, whether it's endurance or strength training. And it can also be helpful to do like maybe something where you're on the ground and then standing up, like for example, maybe doing crunches on the ground and then standing up to do squats. So you're going to get your heart rate moving by going from the ground, coming back up. And most importantly, allow rest. I know there's that saying out there, you know, no rest days or no days off. And unless you are an elite athlete, that's not wise to do. Our bodies do need rest. If we push ourselves too hard, we are increasing the risk of burnout, injury, and that can also affect our immune system, which makes us more susceptible to sickness and disease. All right, and that's all I have for you guys today.
Thank you so much, Danielle. That was such a great presentation.
Thank you.
We have a couple of questions here. Can you recommend a yoga studio near Stony Brook?
I am not from this area, so I don't know a good studio over here, but I would recommend to do a Google search and look at the reviews of what's available. And you can also call nearby studios and see if they offer like a free class or a trial class to see if you can go try it and like it, because it's going to be different everywhere you go. Different teachers have different styles, and it might take a couple of different tries to find someone that works best with you and find what you like.
Great. What vitamin supplements do you recommend for those over 70?
So, I mean, you could do a standard multivitamin, like the ones that are geared towards older adults, but it might vary individually. So it's always good to get blood work done to see if you're deficient in anything, and also kind of speak with your doctor about if you have a certain disease, are you at risk for a deficiency of certain nutrients or not, or medications that you might be taking that might interact. So it's hard to say, but standard multivitamin could always be a good option. And then meeting with your doctor or finding a dietitian, getting blood work done, and going over what your dietary intake is like to see if you might benefit from a more specific supplement.
How can we reduce belly fat?
That's a great question. So honestly, kind of all the tips that I gave in the in the presentation are all helpful for reducing belly fat. And the most important thing that I really try to emphasize to everyone, because we can give all these different tips, but if you're not consistent and patient with your behavior patterns and the changes you make, it's going to be really hard to make changes that last, because a lot of people get impatient waiting, not realizing it takes a while to see changes within the body. It can take up to 12 weeks to see physical changes in your body by starting exercise routines and changing your nutrition. So all the tips that I gave in the presentation, which this does go onto the Mather website, you can always rewatch it and kind of look back at the tips that I gave. But it could also be helpful to start working with a dietitian or a personal trainer to really get more information specific to you.
That's a great segue into our next question. Do you have dietitians available? So maybe you could walk everybody through the kind of process and, meeting with you or another dietitian.
So where I am specifically is a little unique. I'm in the Bariatric Center of Excellence at Mather. So we only see bariatric patients, which you have to meet a specific criteria to be able to qualify for surgery. So it might be something you want to consider depending on what your own situation is like and what possible disease states you might have present, and depending on your body size and body weight. We also have, for people who don't qualify for surgery, it's called medical weight management. I personally don't do that part of the program. There's 2 other dietitians who do that in our office. But if someone was interested in that, they can call our office. It's 631-686-2513 to get more information about that. And if you wanted to see a dietitian on your own that's outside of Mather, you can do a Google search, dietitians near me. Some dietitians take insurance, some don't take insurance. It kind of depends on their own practice. You could also call your insurance company to try and find a dietitian within your network. And you can also ask your doctor, like your primary care. Sometimes they have referrals for dietitians based on insurance that they might be able to give you as well.
Okay, great. And Danielle had also mentioned this recording will be available. We just have to pull it together and download it. And once it's approved, we will send it out to everybody who attended, and it will be posted on the Mather website. Danielle, how important is BMI?
It's important, but it's not the only important factor. It can give us a little bit of an idea of somebody's health, but it's not going to give us the whole picture. And as a dietitian, I do look at BMI, but I also look at what the person's dietary pattern is like, what types of foods they do take in regularly. Do they have a varied diet? Are they getting enough calories? Are they getting enough macros and micros? Are they hydrated? What's their exercise like? So there's a lot of different things that go into what overall health looks like, and BMI plays one part of the picture, but it's not going to give us everything, and it can vary. Sometimes athletes, for example, who have a lot of muscle on their body, they might show up with a BMI that's considered overweight or obese, but have minimal fat on their body. So BMI is really just based on height and weight. It doesn't necessarily tell us how much muscle or fat is on a person's body.
Okay, great. Somebody had mentioned if the dietitians were covered by insurance, but I think you touched on that, right?
It does depend. Within like the Mather Hospital, you do have to have insurance to do the bariatric surgery. There is the out-of-pocket option. Not a lot of people do that because it's very expensive, but it is an option. But if you were trying to see just like dietitian, out in society, it's going to depend on what their practice is like, because there's a lot of dietitians that take insurance. There's a lot of dietitians that are only out of pocket. So it depends.
Okay, great. Would losing 35 pounds in 35 weeks be a good SMART goal?
So it kind of depends. It sounds like that would be 1 pound a week, which is pretty ideal. It's that 0.5 to 1% or 1 to 2 pounds a week. So it sounds like they're saying a pound per week, which would be considered sustainable.
Are flavored carbonated waters good to drink, such as the Ice brand?
Those can be. So with flavored carbonated waters, ideally we want to make sure that there isn't excessive added sugar in it. A lot of those things, they use what's called non-nutritive sweeteners, meaning, for example, like stevia or Splenda, they don't have calories, but they still sweeten it. So they can be used, and that's sort of individualized. Some people are turned off by those flavors. Some people might get what's called gastric distress, so they might experience like gas or bloating if the type of sweetener that's used doesn't agree with them. A lot of people struggle with sugar alcohols. So if you're able to tolerate it and you like it, then it's totally great to use. But if it makes your stomach feel a little uncomfortable, then it might be helpful to try a different option.
I had the sleeve surgery and gained 45 pounds back. Is there a second chance surgery?
Can you say that one more time?
Yes, yeah. Sorry, I had the sleeve surgery and have gained 45 pounds back. Is there
Okay.
a second chance surgery?
It definitely depends. What I would recommend, if you had surgery with us, or even if you didn't have surgery with us, you can call our office. We did develop a program for patients who regained weight after surgery and are trying to lose weight again. It's called Back on Track. If you are already a patient within our practice, you should call the doctor's office just to have an appointment with them, get reassessed, and get back into the program, and then we get you set up with nutrition. And if you had surgery elsewhere, you can become a patient of our practice. You would just, again, have to call our doctor's office to get your insurance verified and be able to start the program.
Is there a good site to use to find out the calories in certain kinds of food, such as how many calories would be in something like a grilled cheese sandwich?
So a good website, there's MyFitnessPal, and there's also, it's called Cronometer, Cronometer. They're two really great food tracking websites or apps. And to figure out the calories of it, you do have to put in whatever the ingredients is that you're eating. So let's say for a grilled cheese sandwich, if you used 2 slices of white bread, you would put in 2 slices of white bread. And if you know you used 3 slices of Swiss cheese, you would put that in as well. And it would show you what the total calories is.
Okay, great. Can you post the number for the medical weight management program again? Maybe you could share that with everybody.
Is there somewhere I can type it, or can I just state it?
I maybe just say it one more time.
Okay. 631-686-2513.
Great. And I'll put that in the email that gets sent out to everybody who attended as well. So you'll have a quick way to contact them there. A couple more questions here. What is the minimum weight requirement for bariatric surgery?
So it's a minimum BMI requirement, and the minimum is 35. And for BMIs between 35 and 39.9, you do have to have at least one comorbidity. The comorbidities, hypertension, sleep apnea, or diabetes. If your BMI is over 40, then you don't have to have a comorbidity, you would just qualify.
Okay, perfect. And do you recommend using mail order food companies to receive a balanced diet? I'm assuming this is like HelloFresh and.
So those can certainly be utilized. I mean, there's so many different companies that are coming out now with that, and they can definitely be really helpful. And I know from the ones that I've looked at, they do have different options like lower carb, higher protein. They do have vegetarian options. And they typically are very balanced meals. And a lot of these companies are trying to get dietitians involved in, developing the products. So for the most part, they are pretty great. I think really the only downside might be that they do tend to be a little bit higher in sodium, but I don't think it's the worst thing in the world. It usually is a pretty good trade-off.
Okay, great. And what do you think of Weight Watchers?
It's hard to say. They can be great, but there's aspects of it that aren't that great. I mean, I've had a lot of people I've worked with that came from Weight Watchers that they used to have a really healthy relationship with food, and then getting really hung up in like the points or the green light, the red light, the yellow light that they use now can kind of really mess with your relationship with food. And unfortunately, a lot of it is computerized and it's very robotic, where you don't get a lot of the expertise that people need to make food choices. And I had a patient who was afraid of eating oatmeal because it was showing up as like yellow and red on the Weight Watchers app, meaning that it wasn't a good option. Meanwhile, oatmeal is a really great option, and it can be a little hairy with Weight Watchers, but they can be helpful because they have that group component, so a lot of people feel supported by it. So it really kind of depends on what you're looking for.
Okay, perfect. If anybody has any questions, please feel free to enter them, because that looks like we are just about wrapping up. Danielle, I want to thank you again for joining us today. That was extremely insightful. You guys will be getting a link to watch the webinar again. And if you could please fill out the form, the quick survey that appears right at the end of this, we'd really appreciate it. It just helps us learn what you guys would like to learn in our future webinars. All right, everybody, please enjoy the rest of your day.
You too.